Good evening. My name is William Swindon. I'm the Director of International Business Studies here at Temple University Japan campus. I always tell my students I know who's going to get an A by who sits in the front row. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. It's kind of a cold summer night. It's my favorite kind of weather. Welcome on behalf of ICAS, Institute of Contemporary Asian Studies here at Temple University. Can I ask, just to get us started, how many of you this is your first ICAS event? Okay. So we would like to ask that maybe if you, so that we can keep in contact with you, if you could give us your business card or a way to contact you in the future, and we'll add you to our mailing list if you don't mind. And also, there's no charge, but we're a temple, we're not a church, but we take donations. So please, if you are so inclined, we appreciate that. As I mentioned, I'm the director of the International Business Studies program. And business schools in America and around the world have invested a lot of time and energy with the notion of stakeholder value. But this is a very sort of, in a very complex, interconnected world, we're finding more and more that we can't just look at stakeholder value. There are other, actually we can't just look at shareholder values, there are other stakeholders. And we need to look at more than just the bottom line. We need to be looking at issues of ethics and ethical consumptions. And so tonight's talk is going to be on is ethical consumption going to change Japan? We're very fortunate to have with us Dr. Florian Kohlbacher, who's a senior research fellow and head of business economics section at the German Institute of Japanese Studies, DIJ. Yes, DIJ, when you say it in German. That's right. In my opinion, more importantly, he's also an adjunct professor here. He teaches in our business school. He teaches in some other schools, and he is a visiting researcher at the Institute for Media and Communications at Keio University. He is the author of the 2007 International Marketing in a Networked Economy, and the co-editor of the Silver Market Phenomena, Marketing and Innovation in an Aging Society. He's looked quite a bit at demographics and the changing demographics from a marketing and consumption point of view. And so I've been looking forward to this. As some of you know, we originally were going to have this back in April, so I've been waiting to hear, and so we're no longer waiting. I give you Dr. Kohlbacher.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation to give a talk here tonight. Thank everyone for joining us here tonight. I was just reflecting today as I went through my slides again on the title that I chose for this. I usually tell my students never choose questions as titles for presentations, and I have to admit I've given this talk in preliminary versions on different occasions. And I simply ran out of ideas, it seems, when Temple asked me to send over the title in abstract, so I said, okay, is ethical consumption going to change Japan? I'm hoping to attract more people with such a title, and now I have a problem because now I need to answer this question. So is it going to change Japan? Well, the answer is, the answer I can give is, I don't know. We're going to find out, but, hopefully. But I gave it some thought today, and when I was thinking about it, I had one idea. How it potentially is going to change Japan. In one way, Japan could look like after ethical consumption, especially ecological consumption, change Japan is like that, and I'm not sure if this is going to work or not. This is part of Japan's Setsudenku that especially started after last year's
Cool biz.
And that's cool biz, exactly. So that's how people are going to dress in the future to keep cool and fresh. That's also part of a government initiative. Even though it's not directly related, this is a private company that did that. But more seriously, power-saving products, Setsuren products, are very popular right now in Japan, especially after the nuclear accident that we had last year. This is a ranking of hit products that's produced by the Nikkei Marketing Journal every year, and you can see that power-saving products and Setsuden products are ranked #1 for 2011. And they also mentioned that the earthquake had some impact on consumer sentiments, saying that people now realize the importance of their ties to family, communities, and the planet. So that's why we need ecological products, energy-saving products, but also services and products that make it easier for us to maintain our relationships with other human beings, as well as the environment. And in relation to that, I'm sure all of you are aware of that, there's been a lot of talk about Kizuna, bonding in Japan. It has also been elected as the kanji, the Chinese character of the year last year in Japan. So these keywords, power saving, Setsuden, as well as Kizuna, are two very important keywords when we talk about ethical consumption. I will come back to them as we go on. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, well, first of all, I'll give you a brief introduction to this topic. Of course, we need to define what is ethical consumption. What do I mean by it? And I'll give you some facts, some examples. It's just a selection because, as we shall see, it's a very broad concept, very broad in scope. Focusing on ecological consumption and on fair trade, the fair trade market. And then, of course, I have some, I'm a researcher, obviously I do some research, and I show you part of this work, or some results from this work, an empirical research project that I've done. And then I'll offer you my conclusions, and I hope then we have enough time to discuss these conclusions, and I'm looking forward to your comments and your opinions on that. So here is a book that was published by a consulting firm earlier this year, saying this is for people who don't know the word ethical. And I have to say the word ethical, not in its sense of the meaning of the word philosophical sense, but as rendered in katakana, referring to ethical consumption. It says only 11% of Japanese people know about that. So who has heard of ethical consumption before this talk? So is that more than 11% of the audience? Anyway, so it's not a very familiar concept yet overall, I would say, especially in Japan. Okay, well, as for the introduction, just some keywords to follow up on the Setsuden, the power saving story that I told you in the first slide. Corporate social responsibility is all the rage in Japan for the past, or it has been all the rage in Japan for the past about 10 years. It was said in 2003 was the CSR done in the first year in Japan where CSR started. Obviously, we had some concept similar to CSR in Japan before, but we didn't use the word CSR, and now we're using it. Sustainability is used very frequently. I've already referred to Kizuna, Setsuden. And then, of course, if you watch commercials, I mean, for the past couple of years, eco has been very ubiquitous. And other English words have entered the scene as well, like green and ethical, more recently. Well, why is all of that important? First of all, we have the business side. So what's the responsibility of businesses, especially social responsibility, like in CSR? Here's a poll from an American consulting firm asking the informed public in a number of countries whether they would agree, whether they agree with the famous statement by Milton Friedman that social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. And interestingly, among all the countries of the world, Japan ranked very high among those countries that the majority of people said, yes, that's true. The only responsibility of businesses is to increase profits. Now, of course, that's up. First of all, I mean, it's done by consulting firms, so we can, debate of whether these results are meaningful or not. And it's also a matter of interpretation what we mean by that. If we assume that in a country like Japan, corporations behave within the legal framework that is set by the government, and if they follow all the rules, then they're socially responsibly, probably in the first place. So the only thing that they still have to do is increase their profits. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's no social responsibility apart from that. But that could be another interpretation. But however, another interpretation could be to say that, well, there's no social responsibility for the businesses apart from increasing their profits. So consumers have to do something. And this is from a survey by the Cabinet Office, basically by the Japanese government, from 2008, where it was showing that about 70% of the people were wishing to be helpful to society in one way or the other. And that this percentage of people who want to be helpful to society has been increasing over the past years. Now, it's a very nice wish, of course, to have, but how do you do that? Well, one way to do that is to use consumer behavior to make changes to make it a better society. And here again, there were about 60% of people to the same survey that said you can actually use or leverage consumer behavior in order to change society. Okay? And that actually also makes sense if you look at the percentage of consumer expenditures that contribute to GDP of countries, which in many of the industrialized nations is more than 50%. So consumer expenditures make up the bulk in many countries of GDP, in Japan about 55%. So obviously if you change consumer behavior and consumer expenditures, we can make a difference to that particular economy, to that particular country. So it makes sense. So that's one of the issues here in the background of ethical consumption. Is consumer behavior, especially changing consumer behavior, potentially can be very powerful in making changes. Okay, so let's take a look at ethical consumption. Well, here's a definition. Ethical purchasing or ethical consumption is a very broad expression, embracing everything from ethical investment to the buying of fair trade products and from consumer boycotts to corporate environmental purchasing policies. So obviously, it's really, really broad. So we can just look at some of these aspects here tonight. I have to admit, it's not really that new concept, even though the term itself is rather new and not so well known. It has its roots in the environmental movement, and it's focused on the protection of the environment. That's where it all started. It's a very important aspect of ethical consumption. But it also adopts a broader people perspective relating to the manufacture, use, and disposal of products. That's about kind of, in a sense, from a user's perspective, the life cycle of a product. It's manufactured, then it's sold, it's used by people, and it's disposed of by people. So recycling, for example, is one issue of that. Ethical consumption covers, as I said, a very wide spectrum of activities ranging from the well-established environmentally conscious behavior of recycling, reducing energy consumption, etc., as I said before. But there's other matters of conscience that could also be seen as part of this definition. So sustainable development, fair trade, as has been mentioned, boycott. So that's actually, you can see active ethical consumer behavior and kind of avoidance of certain behaviors. So boycotting would be one example of that. So there's positive and negative ways of doing that. Avoiding products that have been produced by using sweatshop labor, protecting animals' welfare, and other issues regarding organic and genetically modified foods and so on. So it's really, really broad. In a nutshell, that's the message of this slide, basically. So to sum up again, ethical consumption, sometimes it's also called social consumption, is about being environmentally friendly, both in the production, consumption, and the disposal of products. It's socially and ethically responsible. That's more on the side of the producers rather than the consumers. So that potentially also includes CSR, fair trade, etc. And it should be ideally sustainable. And that fits actually quite nicely with the concept of marketing 3.0 by Philip Kotler, our big marketing guru. Basically, I'm not going into detail here, but kind of, he's not mentioning the word ethical consumption in this book, but I think there's a relation to what he's arguing in this book, but you can see other. Here's one example from the UK, which is a very advanced economy in terms of ethical consumption. The Kohlbacher bank is issuing an ethical consumer report every year, where they list up the consumer expenses that are supposedly ethical every year, and are saying that British consumers are spending a little less than £900 a year on ethical products. And this starts with ethical investments like green mortgages, renewable energy, local shopping, and other things. It's just an example, so you can see in a household. There's various ways of aspects of daily life and expenditures where you could potentially use ethical products instead of more regular.
What is a green mortgage?
That's a very good question. I need to look it up. from what I know, it's part of the ethical investments. I assume that the investment fund behind it is investing only in green products and so on. But I'm honestly speaking not completely sure. And overall, ethical spending has been growing over the years, from 1999 when the first report was issued to the last one, which refers to the year 2000. That's just one example. But it's difficult to find similar data, fine-grade level data, from other countries. So the UK is a forerunner, a leader in that respect. I'm not quite sure what to make of this quote, but it just made me think of it when I read this quote on corporate sustainability. I don't know if this is true, if this holds true in every country, but I think sometimes the ethical consumption is similar. So a lot of people nowadays talk about it. I mean, you read articles in the newspaper about it being ecological and this and that. But if you look at it beyond the surface or under the surface, you don't really find it. Anyway, yeah. And it's actually true. I mean, the problem is you all want to be ethical. You all want to be ecological, of course. We want to protect the environment. We want to be respectful of other people. But damn, the problem is, you know, it's too expensive in many instances. Or you simply can't find the products. You go into the supermarket, you look for fair trade products, you can't find it. And then you buy something else. So it's a moral dilemma in the end that we face as a consumer, as a shopper. Okay, but let's get a little bit more serious here. I mean, this is the university and I'm a researcher, so I need to talk a little bit about previous research, okay? Who has done research on these issues and what did people find when they did this research? Well, first of all, research into ethical issues is still dominated by corporate as opposed to consumer ethics, actually. So a lot of the research papers that you find in international academic journals, they deal with corporate ethics. Are managers ethical? Do corporations behave ethical or not? And there's not too many studies being conducted on the ethics of consumers. However, the ethical consumer movement is now well recognized, and there's more and more studies coming up on this topic as well. And there's two important findings among the many findings that are out there that come up over and over again in all these studies. One is the attitude-behavior gap, and that's something that doesn't only happen for ethical consumption, for many other consumer behaviors as well. So there's far more consumers who profess to care about ethical issues or care about the environment than they actually purchase ethical products. So everyone's agreed, okay, oh, I like the environment, I like being ethical, I agree with that, but in the end it's either too expensive, the products are not available, or for whatever other reason, they simply don't shop or buy these products. And that has been well recognized in a number of studies in many countries and across the years also. And another issue is that all these studies had, of course, always findings on demographic variables like age and gender, but they're not consistent. So we're not really sure in what way demographic variables contribute or influence ethical consumption behavior. So probably socio-demographics are poor determinants of ethical purchasing behavior, so we need to find other factors that matter. And I'll show you when I more of these factors that play a role here when I introduce when I present my findings from my research. If you look at ethical consumption in Japan, in the international literature, you can find only a handful of studies. The first paper here, it's a little bit old, it's from 1999. They only looked at the perceptions and attitudes of people, not at actual behavior, so that's a shortcut. More recently, in 2006, there was a paper that surveyed marketing students at religious and non-religious universities. Again, that was only about perceptions and attitudes. Again, they didn't look at actual consumer behavior. Sudbury and others, and the others include myself, published a paper on older people in 4 different countries. One of them was Japan. It's more about the ecological consumer behavior, so it's not about ethical consumption in total, even though we touch upon that, but that's one of the recent studies. And one paper authored by Japanese professors is on the willingness to pay for green electricity, but that's again a very specific topic rather than ethical consumption overall. If you look into the Japanese-speaking journals, you can't really find any study on ethical consumption per se. There's a number of studies on various related topics: ethical investing, environment conscious behavior, energy saving, and stuff like that. But we don't really find any study on ethical consumption overall. However, we do find more and more instances of papers or articles on ethical consumption in the popular press or in the business press that's for a more broader audience rather than purely academic literature. And sometimes the term Linditek shohi is used, which is just a literal translation of the term. One of the first people to use that and actually spread this term in Japan is Mr. Toyota, who's a researcher at the Research Institute for Culture, Energy and Life at Osaka Gas Corporation. And he wrote a series of 11 articles for a newspaper describing the phenomenon, giving a definition, very much in line with what we have in the Western literature, and just using some Japanese examples. Another one is the term social shohi, so social consumption. Mr. Kamijo is senior manager at Dentsu Corporation, the advertising agency, and the head of the social planning office. He wrote a book called Social Shohi, and his definition of social consumption is very similar to our definition of ethical consumption. However, in the book, he talks about tons of things, but not really much about social consumption. So it's just the title of the book. He talks about it a little bit, but then mostly he talks about other consumption. It's nevertheless a very interesting read, so I recommend it. And then more recently, I've shown you the cover of the the Ashita Shohi book by Delphi Corporation. And they have run this project on ethical consumption the past couple of years, running some online surveys. I present some findings of this little bit later. And they sometimes refer to it as yoi shohi, as good consumption. And they're arguing that ethical consumption enhances the happiness of people. So in the end, that's the overall goal. We all want to be happy. So I hope you will be happy after this talk too. I have something to make you happy a little bit later on, so please look forward to it. This is Mr. Toyota from Osaka Gas. They published a journal, and they had a special issue in ethical consumption earlier this year. So this is just to market myself, of course. Feel free to download it free of charge from their homepage. We had a discussion about ethical consumption together. And more recently, a number of newspapers, business newspapers mainly from the Nikkei family, published some short articles on ethical consumption starting in 2011. And then they give these definitions. You don't have to read them, I won't read them out, but basically, believe me, they're very similar to the definitions that I just gave you, including fair trade and all these other things. So basically, by using this foreign language word, eshika, they adopted the definition that has been used in the West and brought it now into Japan. And that's just a recent phenomenon. And Delphi's ran a survey, an online survey last August, asking people whether they knew various terms related to ethical consumption, and then they found that only 11% knew eshika. But that doesn't mean that Japanese people are unethical. Of course, there's a word, Linditeki, that means ethical in its philosophical sense. People, I hope at least, are aware of that. But they're not aware of this new term and what it actually means. People are very well aware of eco, of course. That's very famous. People are also very aware of lohas, which means lifestyles of health and sustainability. However, I have a feeling that people may not know this concept. They may rather, this is a different company, they may rather know the bottled water by Coca-Cola.
Right.
That's what I assume. That's why they know lohas. But that's what I think. Fair trade is not very well known. And surprisingly, people didn't know sustainability, but I assume that's because they gave the katakana word instead of the regular Japanese term, and that's why people didn't know. So that's you always have to be careful with these kinds of survey results, because it depends on how you ask people, and then you get different answers. Last year, right after the earthquake, 2 or 3 weeks later, on March 30th, the Nikkei Marketing Journal published this article saying that ethical consumption will be the power to rebuild Japan kind of after the earthquake. So there has been, after the earthquake, more and more talk about ethical consumption. People's mindsets have changed. There's more consciousness for protecting the environment, alternative forms of energy and so on, supposedly. And that was the same thing with the article that I mentioned about the hit rankings for last year. So the ability to save energy and connect with others is the story of 2011 in terms of consumption. Overall, to sum up what's going on in Japan, there's two very important market segments in terms of ethical consumption. One is ecological consumption, and that has become quite well known, partly due to a campaign run by the Japanese government on the eco-bonds. That was in order to encourage people to purchase energy-efficient home appliances to reduce CO2 emissions. But actually it was a stimulus package for the Japanese economy. It was very successful in economic terms, and the government is saying it's also successful in terms of its ecological goals, but it was probably not necessarily that ecological, but it was a very successful stimulus package. And the other market is fair trade, which is still very small and very hardly known in Japan. I'll come back to that a little bit later, so I won't go into detail here. It's very small, but it's growing. And these are the two markets that I want to talk about today. So I'll show you some more slides on ecological consumption first, before we move on to fair trade. Now this is from the same survey by the Cabinet Office that I showed you a little bit earlier from 2008. And they found that environmentally conscious behavior is not really common in daily purchase activities here. And they listed a number of things, including bringing your own bags to the supermarket to take your purchases back home with you, only buying the stuff necessary that you really need, choosing local products over imported products, and other things. So for some of these behaviors, a lot of people said they would do them, and for others not so much. So overall, they have the conclusion that environmentally friendly consumer behavior is not really common yet. This is from a different survey, splitting up the results by age and gender. What we can see here is that, first of all, women are a little bit more environmentally conscious than men are, and interestingly, also the older cohorts are more environmentally conscious in their purchasing behavior than younger people. And I come back to that when I show you my own. And this is a very important point. I've already mentioned cost before. Often ecological or environmentally friendly products are more expensive than other solutions or other products. So there's a survey asking people how much more they would be willing to pay for an eco-friendly product. And the majority, like more than 65%, said it's only about if it's about the same. I wouldn't want to pay more for it. But 30% said, well, if it's 10 to 20%, it's fine. I'm not sure if they're really honest here or not. But people definitely wouldn't want to pay more than that for an eco-friendly product. So that's a very important point. In general, people want to be environmentally friendly. They want to protect the environment. But it's a problem if it's too expensive. And then there's, just a couple of slides with examples. We all know about hybrid cars, electric cars. And there's of course also a debate, is this ecological, is this environmentally friendly? Obviously walking would be better for the environment than riding any kind of transportation vehicle probably. But it's maybe still better than gasoline-driven cars. But the Japanese are very advanced in these technologies. The Tokyo Motor Show last year was dominated by the topic of green cars and energy-efficient cars, for example. Panasonic created the green Santa Claus to launch its eco-idea programs to have the eco-house that you can visit actually in Odaiba, their showcase house. The problem again is cost. They have a very nice showcase house, but nobody's ever going to be able to afford it. So it's simply too expensive.
Why?
Because it has so many technical features and so on that it makes it incredibly expensive. That's one of the reasons. So probably they need to develop a low-tech version of that, if it's still then as energy efficient as it is. But I think they've just tried to put too many features in there at the same time.
But if I can extend this, across the board, eco products are more expensive. Is that an actual a function of production, or do they think there's a specific market they're targeting?
I think there's various reasons for that. One is, of course, in the production process. If you want to be environmentally friendly, you need more better technology for that. And sometimes this can only be produced in Japan versus more cheaper options that you can get if you get your things manufactured in China. It depends on the functionality. It literally depends on the product. So not necessarily all of these products have to be more expensive. And sometimes it's just a marketing thing. It's just a premium price to indicate that this is better. So it's very hard to tell in general. For economy, I mean, that's just an example. This one's interesting if you want to save energy to recharge your mobile phone. This has been selling like crazy, apparently more than 1 million sold within just a couple of months. I bought one of them. It immediately broke. So either I was too stupid to use it, or it's not good quality. I can't tell you, but I still recommend you guys trying it.
Misery loves company.
This was interesting. I'm not sure if this is still in operation, but last year, May 22nd, they announced Osaka Station announced the very first taxi stand for eco-friendly taxis at Osaka Station. I don't know if it's popular, if it's still being used, but there's tons of these kinds of news about saving energy and this. And then, of course, the EcoPoint campaign, which over a period of 3 years used up almost 700 billion yen as a subsidy program. I've already mentioned these points about encouraging the purchase of energy for home electronics and so on, stimulating Japanese demand. This is a report by the Japanese government. It's available in both English and Japanese as of this June, saying that the 3 main goals were achieved. One is the promotion of global warming countermeasures. So we're saying we were reducing CO2 emissions by that. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, one of the problems with the EcoPoint campaign is, for example, with flat panel TVs. They always measured the amount of energy saving by comparing the same size of a screen to a traditional one, the new flat panel technology to a traditional TV screen at the same size, which means that if you have a small screen, you only save a little bit of energy. But if you have a very, very big screen compared to the previous model, you save a lot of energy. But overall, obviously, a big screen still uses up more energy than a smaller one. So this program actually encouraged people to buy bigger TVs rather than smaller TVs, which of course is not ecological. That was the problem from the environmental perspective. But anyway, the government is claiming it was successful. It was a big stimulus for the economy, that's for sure. The sales of the 3 home appliance products that have been selected for that, flat panel TVs, air conditioners, and refrigerators, increased by about 2.6 trillion yen. Overall, they issued almost 640 billion yen in eco points for the campaign in 45 million cases. So in that sense, it was successful. Another goal of that was by exchanging these TV sets, because they were going from terrestrial broadcasting to digital TV, so they wanted people to encourage to change the TV sets as quickly as possible, so that also worked fine. These are the figures for these 3 different product categories. The sales increased steadily over the time of the campaign. Well, this is by the government, and this is from the Nikkei Business article, where they analyzed the sales of TVs during the EcoPoint campaign. But assuming that without the EcoPoint campaign, TV sales would have grown just like this curve is showing. But with the EcoPoint campaign, sales were soaring just before the campaign ended. So we're selling many more of these flat panel TVs that they would have sold without the EcoPoint campaign. So apparently there was an economic effect. More interestingly for us is, why did people buy these EcoPoint products? Well, some people were saying because the product was cheaper than the old. Or it had nothing to do with EcoPoint. I was planning to buy the product anyway. Well, that makes sense too. I'm going to save expenditures in electricity, or because the products that can change for the EcoPoints are interesting to me. And because I want to contribute to the prevention of global warming. Well, overall, it means some people were pretending that the reasons for this were really ecological, and others were just very frank and said didn't have anything to do with it. So just by looking at the figures of the EcoPoint campaign, we can't really say whether people were consuming ecologically or not, because there's an economic incentive as well. So it's very difficult to disentangle that. What are the real motivations of people for doing that? And is it still ethical? But that's maybe a philosophical question. There was also a housing EcoPoint program, but I think we can skip that. Save the date if you're interested in eco products. You can go to the yearly annual Eco Products Fair on the big site in December. You can go to the homepage and find more information if you're interested. So this has been around for, I think, now 10 years approximately, a trade show for eco products. That's quite interesting to see the latest innovations in that area. Okay, let's move on to the fair trade market. Who's not familiar with the term fair trade? You all know it, so I mean, you don't have to really go into details here in terms of the definition. So it's a social movement and market-based approach that aims to help producers in developing countries, basically. So we all agreed on that. So I skipped the rest of the definition. Some figures for fair trade globally. There's about 900 certified fair trade producers worldwide in 60 developing countries. The estimated retail value of fair trade products is about 4.36 billion euros. I don't know, it's about $5 billion US last year, something like that. Fair trade sales grew by 40% or more in 5 countries from 2009 to 2010. That's the latest figures. Actually, FLO, the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, is going to publish its latest annual report probably by the end of this month. So we'll also get the data for 2011. And unfortunately, I checked the webpage today, it's not available yet. And there's roughly 20,007 fair trade products being sold in over 70 countries. If we compare overall, we compare the countries, or at least some of them, we can see that, yeah, it's almost invisible, I know, that the Japanese fair trade market is really small. I mean, that's the overall retail value. If you look at it in terms of per capita consumption, it's about 7 euro cents per year, or 9 euro cents per year in Japan, as compared to 3 euros in Germany, for example, and 14 or 15 euros in the UK. So it's very, very small. And this is why some people say that fair trade is about products from developing countries. So this is why some people say Japan is a developing country in terms of fair trade. So there's the Wakatiai project, which is an MPO that's trying to support fair trade in Japan, and they made this postcard to increase people's awareness, which I think is quite nice. However, if you look at growth rates, I mean, obviously the Japanese market is quite small, so it's more easy to achieve higher growth rates. The Japanese fair trade market has been enjoying quite high growth rates, like 44% and so on over the past year. We went down to 2% the year before last year because of a problem with some imported coffee. And coffee makes up the bulk of the fair trade market in Japan. So that was an exceptional year. Last year was then, again, a 14% increase. So overall, the market is growing in Japan. Even though, I mean, 44% is quite high, but 14 or 40% is like average for fair trade on a global basis. So it's not growing that tremendously. This is again from the government survey. What do you think about purchasing fair trade products? Well, about 60% of people say we don't even know what fair trade is. Okay, so that's a big problem. And again, the story that I've told you before, if it was cheaper, I would buy it. If the price was equal, I would buy it. I would pay a little bit more for it. That's just a small minority of people. So again, it's the cost. That's a big problem. Overall, I've already shown you the market is growing. The sales of fair trade products in Japan are increasing. And it's about 14.4 million euros in 2010. Now, there's one problem. These figures are from the Fair Trade Labeling Organization. I mean, that's the biggest organization for fair trade worldwide. Usually people use this data. But in Japan, there's also other fair trade products. I mean, they're produced according to similar standards, but they're not labeled by the Fair Trade Labeling Organization. And there's just some estimates, so we don't have any real figures. But probably the overall market volume in Japan is about twice as much as FLO is publishing, because there's at least the same amount of sales or same amount of products being sold that are fair trade, but they're not labeled fair trade. And the difference is between fair trade as spelled as one word, which is the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, and fair trade written as two separate words. Yes?
Would you happen to know what percentage in 2009, because that's the latest data, the 11.3 million euros
Yes.
is to the total
Oh,
trade?
that's not 11. That's 11.3 million euros in 2009, and in 2010 it was 14.8
Okay,
million.
so well, let's take the 2010 figure then.
Yeah.
Would you happen to know what percentage this 14.4 million euros is to the entire pie of trade in Japan? Have you seen any figures on that? Just to get a sense for some perspective.
I don't know, but it's very small. It's
Very small.
It's probably a single
Fraction
digit.
of a percent,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Starbucks may make up something like 20% of that.
Right. But
Okay.
it's very, very small. There's a recent survey that was conducted by an NPO called Fair Trade Town Japan, surveying about 1,000 Japanese people between 15 and 65. And they found that 50% have heard of fair trade. However, unfortunately, most of these people thought of something completely else in terms of fair trading and so on, not fair trade. So only 25.7% knew the real meaning of fair trade as the definition I'm using here. Of these 25.7%, only 35.5% again of them have ever bought a fair trade product. So people know about it. I mean, some people know about it. But of these people, again, only some people really buy these products. Why don't they buy them? Well, first of all, they don't know where to buy them. They don't know how to identify them. So they see them on the shelves, but is this fair trade or is it not fair trade? We don't know. It's difficult for consumers to tell. Or they're just sold places that are remote or not located conveniently for them to shop with. The products they most often buy are coffee, chocolate, handicrafts, and tea. That are the most important fair trade products being sold in Japan, but also other countries. Well, there's some positive aspects of fair trade in Japan. The market is growing. It has been established. More and more people know about it. There's some campaigns, especially the younger generations are very much aware of it. Some of the bigger companies like Muji, Tully's and so on have started introducing fair trade products as fair trade chocolate. Again, overall, the bulk of it, about 80% is coffee in Japan, then handicrafts, garments, and others. And another company that has started to introduce fair trade products is Aeon, a supermarket chain. They have a brand called Top Value. And they have coffee. They have the very first canned coffee that's fair trade. And they have chocolate. And in order to wake you up now, I brought some of these chocolates, so I'm happy to tell you that Eon is the sponsor for tonight. Yeah, sure. It's good to see that everyone's still awake. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, obviously, the cocoa beans are produced in developing countries, but the chocolate is manufactured in Switzerland. And that's also one of the reasons why Switzerland usually ranks very high in fair trade product sales volume. Not necessarily because they are so eager to purchase these fair trade products, but because a lot of this chocolate is manufactured in Switzerland. There are, however, also some interesting. Oh, you're too busy eating chocolate right now. So are there any questions in the meantime?
The box doesn't say Switzerland.
It doesn't. What does it say? So Eon lied.
No, it implies that it's domestic, I think. Does anybody see a foreign country name? I don't.
Yeah, I just wonder, you haven't mentioned at all organic vegetables, the organic market, and also farmers markets, local shopping, buying directly from farmers. I mean, obviously here, even in the centre of Tokyo, you see farmers coming with their cars. It's not packaged, it's not marketed products.
Yes. Thank you for that comment. Of course, organic products, locally produced products, and stuff like that, low-cost products. Many of these things are part of ethical consumption. as I said, it's a very broad concept. I didn't collect any data on that. I just focus on ecological products and fair trade products today. But there's many more aspects of ethical consumption. We simply can't cover everything tonight, but they're very important. And I think the need and the interest of consumers in these products is also growing.
And do you know if organic, the percentage of organic, market share of organic versus regular, how does it compare with Europe or?
I don't have any data on that.
Because that's also important in the way people evolve. They're moving maybe from regular vegetables to organic. It's the way they're evolving in their.
I don't have any.
Well, it was connected to the previous question. Because I heard that in Japan, one of the aspects that's more than in other countries is the connection to locally produced and knowing where your food is coming from and the pictures we see. But and then it's much more than in other countries, so it could be a way of.
Well, it definitely is, and you know, I mean that's a lot of regions in Japan are famous for certain products. If you go there, you definitely have to consume them, or at least to buy them as souvenirs to bring back. So Japan has always been quite strong in that regard. And I think after the earthquake, especially now supporting the Tohoku region, people are very aware and conscious of that. So while a lot of people in other countries now, it's like, don't bring any products from Fukushima or not even Japan.
Right.
You know, people here are trying to support economies there and keep buying products from Fukushima on purpose, deliberately to support the region. That's a very important aspect. It has become more important in the past 1 year.
Thanks so much for this presentation. I really enjoyed it.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, okay. maybe you should quit while you're ahead. Stop, because it was very good, and I usually get bored very quickly. And plus you give us free food, so I put you as my favorite speaker. There seems to be a fundamental disconnect between this idea of fair trade, ethical consumption on the one hand, and I guess what economists would call economic efficiency on the other. The idea, if I would define economic efficiency, is you get the most production in the least amount of inputs possible. And from everything you've described so far, fair trade is in direct contrast with free trade in terms of you're supposed to, through comparative advantage, import from the rest of the world who makes it the most efficiently. A fair trade is saying, no, that's wrong. We're going to go through a whole set of different criteria. Have you seen any research to suggest that Japan, or any country for that matter, can actually grow economically by adopting the fair trade concept when it turns out, in my field, electricity, what we would call green energies are actually quite, at the moment, uneconomic in terms of price per kilowatt hour. So if we were to expand that concept to all kinds of consumption, where is the argument coming from for economic growth, or is that a mutually exclusive idea?
Well, thank you very much. There's a couple of points. One thing is I've not seen any of these studies that you mentioned. I don't think that we have any data on that. I mean, there's a couple of issues here. One thing is, I mean, there's a debate of whether fair trade is really fair or not. Fair trade, people are arguing there's market failure and that's what we're trying to do. You could also see it as basically you purchase a product and then on top of that you make a donation. So it's charity, basically. So it's not, it's not perfectly economic or rational to do so. It's a charity. It comes from your heart. There's people who argue that it's not good for the developing countries because it gives the wrong incentives. So the children of the coffee bean farmers shouldn't actually become coffee bean farmers. They should get a degree from Temple or Waseda, and then become something else in the future rather than becoming a farmer again. But giving them more income gives them an incentive to stay in this trade. So it distorts basically also the economy in these countries and what people actually want to do. So there's a couple of issues, and actually I should have mentioned that. I mean, I'm not advertising fair trade here as the solution to these kinds of problems. From my perspective as a marketing researcher, I'm saying, well, fair trade is included in the definition of ethical consumption. So let's assume that fair trade is actually ethical consumption. We could actually debate that whether it's really ethical or not, if it makes economic sense or not. But if it is part of the definition, then let's take a look at how the market looks like from the supply side as well as from the demand side. And that's what I'm trying to do. But there's much, much more behind this, so that's why I'm thankful for this kind of comment, because it's not just, we cannot take it for granted that fair trade is actually ethical to begin with. But this is the assumption here for this talk. That's not really the best answer to your question, but just to explain. Yes?
How much more of your talk do you have?
Oh, I mean chocolate or
Talk, your talk. No, you said you're not finished, so.
Yeah, and there's a little bit more to come. But
I was wondering if we should hold the questions, because I have a question, but I.
okay. Well, let's just have one more question and move on.
Okay. Well, first, I want to ask you a question about ethical consumption. I think that ethical consumption is closely related to how to say world how to say world situation of ecology or environmental situation, and if unless people in the world are not interested in world ecological situation, people are not interested in or are not focused on ethical consumption. And what do you think? Do European people or American people or other Asian countries people are interested in ethical consumption in Japan? And the ethical consumption is connected to business, I think. So, for example, Toyota produce many Prius cars. And if it's a good business, so many big companies are focused on that business, ethical consumption. But if not, previously, in the US, I don't know actually better about the 20.
Try to keep your question a little bit shorter.
Okay. Okay. For example, 20 years ago, American company developed electric car 20 years ago, but the company was sued and stopped producing that car because oil it's not beneficial for oil company.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, there's so many issues to look at when we look at ethical consumption. It's consumer sentiment. Some consumers like it because it's a fad. Some consumers like it because they're interested in the third world, so they want to help other countries. Some people are interested in their own energy consumption, or they're just conscious about their own ecological behavior in their own country without thinking about it. So it's very difficult to give a broad answer to that. And of course, there's the supply side, there's competition, there's market failure, there are government regulations. So it's a very, very complex issue overall.
Yeah.
So now we are trying to simplify a little bit here in this talk, obviously, because there's so many variables that we would have to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole regulations and everything. It's a huge topic, and you've raised a number of very important points. But also, there is an interest, vested interest by other companies, like the oil companies, and so on and so on. But that will be an endless topic. We can't go into detail here, but I fully agree with you. Well, to finish up with this part of the talk, fair trade, just two more points. I mean, there's some interesting Japanese innovations in the fair trade market as well. The Wakatiai project, for example, developed products, fair trade products, that are suited to the Japanese taste, like soy sauce and miso, red bean paste. And these products are manufactured in Inner Mongolia in China, and then they're imported into Japan. So there's fair trade products with the fair trade label, by the way. Here, another Japanese innovation is the company People Tree, which was actually founded by a British citizen here in Japan. Right now they also have a subsidiary in London, and the CEO is residing in London, but it's a Japanese company. They don't use the fair trade label, but they have another certificate that they use, so they're selling fair trade garments mostly. They have 2 stores in Tokyo, the main one in Yuba, very interesting. Most of the clients or customers are females, and they're doing quite well in terms of business. I can't go into too much detail here. So there's some positive aspects of fair trade in Japan, but also some negative. Overall, it's still a very small market volume. Not many people know about it, and most of the players in the market are very, very small in terms of the sales and so on, and their influence. A lot of them are entrepreneurs. I'm doing interviews with fair trade companies. Most of these people are entrepreneurs. Wakatiai Project was founded by a Protestant priest. His shop is in his church. Okay? So if you go to see him, he sits in his church and he talks to you. In his garage, by the way, he's producing chocolate.
So he's subsidized, he
Yeah.
doesn't pay rent?
Yeah. Right, and he's protected by someone stronger than even the government. And this is important to students. I'm not sure about TUJ, but students in general here in Japan are the drivers of fair trade. Actually, Eon, the chocolate that you just were just sampling, they developed this product and took it on to their portfolio because of a project by students at Chuo University who were suggesting to them that they should include fair trade products in their portfolio. So students are very active. There's a network of students in fair trade. So
Isn't this somewhat contradictory with the statistics you showed us earlier that show that those over 60 are more?
that was ecological.
Oh, okay.
And I come back to that in a second. Well, let's take a little bit, a short look at some of the data that I have collected. The effort was part of an international study on ethical consumption by older people. Some of you who know me know that I do a lot of research on older people in Japan, the silver market phenomenon. However, in Japan, I surveyed Japanese adults aged 20 and older. So we have data for not only old people, but also younger people. And just some of the findings here. I used a battery of items to ask about the attitudes towards fair trade. In the first instance, interestingly, we found that the majority of people agreed that I'm empathetic with the fair trade concept. It's a good thing. I would like to try fair trade products. So again, 60% said yes, I would like. However, once you ask them, I would actively look out for them, seek out for them. If they're difficult to find, no, I don't want to do this effort. Only 30% would do so. And even less if it's more expensive. Only 20% would be willing to pay more. That's a very typical thing. Overall, yes, great thing, but it's too cumbersome and it's too expensive. And also people didn't think that it would enhance their social prestige or status if they were purchasing fair trade products. That was another finding. Then we had a couple of items asking them for their actual behavior, not only their attitudes. And this line here, this column here refers to people who answered most of the time and always. When there's a choice, I choose the fair trade option for all food products. When there's a choice, I choose the fair trade option for all clothing products. About 1/4 of the people said they would. Now that's surprising. We know that the fair trade market is very small. We actually have similar responses here for ethical financial products and free range or freedom food options. Why is this the case? I assume it's because of the way we phrase the question when there's a choice. So whenever people have a choice, they do actually buy it. But most of the time, they probably don't have the choice. So that's the problem. And this one says unaware of choice. These are the people who don't know these concepts. I don't know fair trade, for example. You can see about 40% don't know fair trade, which is in line with the other statistics that I showed you. People don't encourage their friends to use fair trade products. And this one's interesting. I do not buy cosmetics and toiletries that have been tested on animals. More than 55% don't know even this option. What is this? And we found that from our qualitative interviews in the pre-test, we found that this is a no-brainer in the Western world. Everyone says, well, animal welfare. Cosmetics are not necessary. They're not essential. I mean, some people, of course, use them, but you can't torture a poor animal to create cosmetics. However, in Japan, when you ask the consumers, they say, well, are you crazy? You have to test them before you try them on human beings. You know? What are you going to do if someone gets hurt? So it's a completely different attitude towards it. So we should keep that in mind too, yes.
I think that you just pointed out the key in all that you've been telling us that ethical consumerism is a culturally determined attitude. And because of that, rather than try to construct some sort of universal definition, what is interesting is to see where the sensitivities are in different cultures to different types of consumption over which this umbrella, can be lifted. I think that's really the interesting question.
Right. And that's actually also a problem we have with this research project. Because we had to do some compromise, because we ran the survey in 4 different countries. And we would have to adapt it more to the Japanese context. That's what I'm trying to do in my latest research. That was a big issue, because as you say, there are cultural aspects to this. Can we hold the questions? I have a couple more slides.
Just relates to this slide particularly. What is free range freedom food option? What's that?
Free range, this is about how you keep the animals that give the produce, so like chicken, they can run freely. Well, from our survey of older consumers, you could see that the percentage of people unaware of, for example, fair trade and these other things was much higher in Japan than it was in the UK or Germany. And we also had an Eastern European country, Hungary. So some of these people in Hungary were actually knew less about it, but that's because the Iron Curtain that just fell about 20 years ago, so that's a different situation. Overall, we found, in terms of demographics, we found that females were more likely to purchase fair trade products than males, and we found 2 age trends. One was young people in their 20s, like students, were very active in fair trade. Then they were a little bit less active, and then older people were also, again, very much in favor of fair trade products, which was kind of interesting. We also, I'm not going into detail because we don't have much time, we also asked questions about demonstrations and actions, whether people have been standing up for an ethical issue, going to a demonstration, or donating to a charity, and so on. This will be relevant when I show the overall results. And then we asked about ecologically conscious behavior. And we found 2 demographic trends. One, again, was that females were much more proactive in environmentally friendly consumer behavior than men. And there was a clear age trend. The older people were, the more ecologically conscious they were in their consumer behavior. Now, my explanation for this is, but we can debate on that, Japan had a number of pollution problems in the 1960s and 1970s, so probably older people are more aware of this and more sensitive towards these issues. Younger people grew up in a very clean environment and in a very safe environment, so they're maybe not as sensitive to these issues as older people who saw these environmental problems in the 1960s. If you look at pictures of Kawasaki or Kitakyushu from the late 1960s, it's a big mess. I mean, we don't see much of that left now, so it's a different issue. Without going into much detail, from the survey, I was trying to predict ecologically conscious consumer behavior, running a number of regressions, adding more and more variables, trying to explain why people would be ecologically conscious in their consumer behavior. Well, to show you the most important variables that had an influence on this, one thing was ethical positioning, which is the self-perception of how ethical people were. I mean, we're talking about ecological consumption. For people who showed a high score on the ethical positioning scale, then they were also very high on the ecological consumer behavior scale, showing the link between ethical attitudes and ecological consumption. Perceived consumer effectiveness was important. Well, usually people may say, well, if only I myself change my behavior, nothing happens. So I may as well just go on as usual. But if people think that even if a single person changes his or her behavior, it will make a difference, then they think there's consumer effectiveness. And then they're also more likely to purchase in an ecological way. Negative attitudes towards business, whether people trust businesses or not. The less they trust businesses, the more ecological they are. So they don't leave it to the companies. They have to do it by themselves. Life satisfaction was also positively connected to ecological consumer behavior. Even though I'm not really sure about the direction of the relationship. It may also be the other way around. And then we have included some personal values from a scale to measure personal values. We found that valuing warm relationships with other people was positively connected to ecological consumer behavior and a sense of accomplishment as well. We had a control variable, which is social desirability bias. It had an impact. So obviously, people see it as socially desirable to show ecologically conscious consumer behavior. So they're trying to pretend to be more ecological than they really are. This is why we controlled for that. I've told you about the age and gender effect also. And the socioeconomic status was also positively related to ecological consumer behavior, which means that people with a higher socioeconomic status were also more active in terms of ecological consumer behavior. But that was only a very small effect. Well, overall, Japan is a fairly wealthy country, so probably this variable doesn't make too much of a difference. Okay, let me sum up. We saw some gender and age differences. I've mentioned that the females are more proactive in ECCB, is environmentally conscious consumer behavior, and older people were also more proactive than younger ones. There was a strong impact of ethical positioning. I see this as the proof of the connection between ethics and ecological behavior. This is the first study to show this. There was a weak impact of environmental consciousness and attitude towards the environment. This one here. In the previous models, it was significant, but when I included personal values and I controlled for personal values, this connection became statistically insignificant, meaning that personal values are probably underlying the environmental consciousness. So these are more important. That's a detail maybe. There was a relatively strong impact of the attitudes towards business and perceived consumer effectiveness, as I just explained. And there was a relatively strong impact of the personal value warm relationships with others. So that fits nicely with what I said about the discussion in Japan recently about Kizuna bonding and connecting with other people. And the role of life satisfaction is somewhat unclear, so we need more research on that. I always have to say that I'm a researcher, so we always need at least one point where we need to do more research to justify that we applied for money to do the research. So that's very cool. Well, practical implications. Well, there's a substantial number of consumers of ethical and environmentally friendly products, but also a substantial number of people who are not really aware of that. We don't know about it. So we have to tap into this untapped market potential. Or not, maybe not we, but companies maybe have to. The communication is very crucial. People don't know about this, so we need information. Okay, that's very important. And then there's a move to challenge manufacturers to prove the ethical claims they make, particularly as ethical consumers have been found to be skeptical of advertising. So just don't try to assume that your consumers are stupid. They try to get more and more information. You have to be convincing. Are you sincere in your efforts and so on? So what are the tasks? Well, for policymakers, consumer education is a big thing. For ethical consumption, but I think for many other things in Japan, we're still very, very weak in that respect. For businesses, try to better understand the needs and motivations of the ethical consumer. That is, contact me and hire me to give you the information. Overall, and this is the last slide, ethical consumption in Japan is a rather new and still small trend in Japan, but it has a certain potential. It probably gained importance after 3/11 last year, but it's very broad in scope in nature. As I said, I couldn't touch upon all these issues like organic and so on. So overall, we have a lot of potential for improvement and growth. We saw the attitude-behavior gap. People were saying, yes, fair trade is great, but if it's too expensive and so on, we don't really want to buy it. So there's some window dressing going on here. And obviously, again, we need more research. And finally, obviously, this is not only about someone else, the anonymous consumer out there that I surveyed in my research. We're all consumers. Okay? We're consuming fair trade chocolate today. But is this the only fair trade product that you have consumed recently? So what about our own consumer behavior? So maybe we can become more reflective and more sensitive towards these issues as we go shopping, as we consume, and also as we dispose of our goods. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments.
Well, thank you, not only for the chocolate, but very compelling and engaging talk. And normally I take the chairman's role and probably the first question, but I think people are chomping at the bit. So I think you had your hand up first. I'll let you move to the first question.
I would love to know if you know anything about why the UK has been so successful, or is such an advancement for consumption society. Is it something that government has been involved in? Is it something that is developed as a grassroots thing? Because it seems that we can find key, perhaps strategies or things from a successful society.
I think the most important, thank you for your question. I think the most important point is about civil society. And we can see a lot of efforts in the UK. I mean, if you walk into any given town in the UK, you find a lot of charity shops. Starting with Oxfam, the British Heart Foundation, and so on. People give away stuff they don't need anymore, like clothes, books, and so on, free of charge. And then these are being sold, people buy them again. I mean, not the same, of course, but this is donated somewhere. So they have a strong tradition of doing this. And a strong awareness of where do products come from, what kind of products. You go into a pub, just a regular, ordinary pub, and you order your fish and chips, and it will say, okay, this fish and chips is produced by using sustainable cotton. And they use the term sustainable, or sometimes even ethical and so on. So I think it's a grassroots thing that started. It's about the civil society, and it has a longer tradition. I mean, it also took time there, but it has finally taken off. So there's a lot of awareness. People know about this. If you talk about ethical consumption, people know it. When we did the survey in Germany, Japan, you know, what is ethical consumption? So we didn't actually use the term ethical consumption in the survey because people don't know. Yes. Any other questions? Any more chocolate?
You did mention the question of packaging.
Yes.
And not only packaging, but the packaging you get after buying things. I've just moved to Japan and I'm really shocked by the amount of packaging in plastic. It's almost more plastic than food.
Oh. That's a huge issue. The only thing that I very briefly mentioned is about bringing your own bag to the supermarket instead of receiving the plastic bag free of charge and producing more waste. That's certainly a huge issue. I mean, packaging is very important in Japan for many goods. It's part of the good, actually. It's not seen as separate, you know, the product and the package. But it's an issue because it's producing a lot of waste. And in the ethical or ecological consumer movement, they're trying to at least encourage people not to get more and more plastic bags, but to bring their own cloth bags and so on when they go shopping. But I think manufacturers have to become also more conscious of that and not grab everything individually. But it's sometimes because people share some of these products. It's also about the habits of how you consume things, how you offer them to other people. And so that makes it more tricky to remove all of this packaging.
Do you think that these people who are selling those products from abroad, Japan and lately, is it something to be seen as a positive trend for future development of fair trade, or is it just an emotional reaction?
Well, thank you. There are several aspects, I think. I mean, one thing is, I mean, by definition, this is not the classic fair trade where things come from developing countries, but in a sense, the whole periphery of Japan, the countryside and so on, is become more and more a developing region within Japan. So actually, fair trade can now also be applied to these regions. It's certainly the rising awareness of people to these issues is certainly helpful for revitalizing the Japanese countryside. Because that's a big problem. Not only Togo, I mean, Togo has been struggling even before the earthquake, all the more so now. And giving this support of connecting with other people, consuming local products. I think it was helpful in a sense that it was giving rise to this awareness of why do we have to buy everything that is just cheap from the outside, and we ship things around the whole globe if we have it, you know, just a few kilometers away from us. So I think it's helpful. The question is if this, you know, there's a lot of talk about sustainability right now, but is this trend towards sustainability really sustainable in itself? Same with the energy saving thing. People were very, very good at energy saving last year, especially over the summer after the earthquake. But is this sustainable? You know, Tokyo was very, very dark during these months, and nowadays everything is lit up a bit. And you know, how long is this going to continue? That's a very big question. So how do you keep people motivated, and how do you keep people in line that they keep doing these things? You know, there's a lot of consumer fads in Japan. They come and go, and new products come and go. But are these things are going to stay? That's a very crucial question this time. But this is why I chose this title of, is this going to change Japan?
In terms of fair trade, you know, actually, this is the first time I know that what fair trade is, but I don't know actually. So, would you please explain more about fair trade? For example, who decides the price of the product, and what kind of a regulation, or what kind of let's say regulation or evaluation is used to put a price?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, the price is decided by the company. This is not a regulation effort by the government. It's in the private sector. However, the idea behind that is to pay producers, the actual producers, like the farmers in developing countries, a little bit more. It's usually 10% more than is the world market price, so that they get a better income, a better living, so that it's fair to them. And that's why a lot of these fair trade products are also then more expensive, because consumers are paying this premium price in order to support the producers. However, it's very good that you mentioned this issue, because Aeon, for example, is very aware of this problem that if these products, as I showed, are more expensive, then people are not willing to buy them anymore. Yeah. So when they developed this kind of product, they had two very crucial points that they paid attention to. First of all, that the product suits the Japanese taste. A lot of the foreign chocolate is very, very sweet, too sweet for Japanese taste. So they bought the beans, they had them manufactured partly outside the country, partly in Japan, but in a way that it's less sweet, so that it's more suitable to the taste of Japanese consumers. And the other issue, price, because as I said, the reason why they introduced the fair trade price was due to a students' initiative. And the students said, we can't pay more, it has to be cheap. And this is actually cheap, I think it's 100 or 200 yen or something for the package. So it's just like regular chocolate, even cheaper than other chocolate. Mm-hmm. While at the same time they're paying more to the producers. So that was a very innovative way of introducing fair trade that is not, and then showing that it doesn't have to be necessarily more expensive. But the price is decided by the company.
Do you know what the sample size was of the Aeon survey?
The survey was not done by Aeon. I think you referred to the survey by
there was a consulting firm that asked Japanese what they
about fair trade.
About fair trade. Do they know what the concept is? Are they willing to pay more for a product if it's fair trade versus something else? Do you happen to know what the sample size was?
That was about it was 1,076 people. 1, but it was an online survey. And I think they recruited Macromill, the biggest online marketing research company.
Online surveys are dangerous because of self-selection.
Any survey is dangerous. Yeah, but yes, I agree. So it's generalizability of these kind of surveys are difficult.
One more question. You mentioning Aeon as like a big supermarket really developing a product, especially for the Japanese market, so they see the potential of the market. Are there more Japanese companies moving into that direction to the big ones? Just well, you've come across like Lawson with a natural shop that says, oh, it's not really fair trade, but it has some elements as well.
Speaking about fair trade, I mean, the market is very fragmented. The bulk of the fair trade supply is basically very small companies, a lot of entrepreneurial activities out there. And then there's some of the bigger companies. I mean, Starbucks is offering a fair trade coffee, but it's kind of interesting because, I mean, they have maybe only one coffee or even one coffee per month. So if you say, this is the fair trade coffee and the rest of the coffee is unfair coffee, but it doesn't really make sense. There seems to be just cost-related marketing, or it's just, a marketing thing. Same for Tully's or maybe even Muji. while others are moving completely into the direction of only offering fair trade. So that's a whole debate. But more and more companies in general are looking into ethical consumption, ecological consumption, and so on. And certainly they are aware of the fact that people's the awareness among people has risen, and that especially after Fukushima last year, more and more people are also interested in knowing where the things come from. Are they harmful to the environment or not? Are they saving energy and this and that? So, of course, companies are trying to deal with these changes in the consumer sentiment. Yes.
Back to plastic again. I'm also very concerned because I have lived in Japan for a long time, and my raw garbage is maybe about this much, but my plastic every week is about this much. And I was in India last year, and I think that they made it illegal for using plastic. And if a store owner gives a plastic bag to a customer, they get arrested. Have you heard of that? Or
certain states.
In India.
Only in one state.
In one state, but even while it's in India anyway.
No, but in Europe they
really
really like that. Yeah, they stopped using plastic in supermarkets.
And somebody can be arrested.
No. You can only buy a bag. You can buy a bag.
Yeah.
They won't get it for free.
Oh, yeah, here.
But actually, some supermarkets I think have started to
Yes.
make people pay for the plastic bags. And I think that's the easiest solution.
That's what
It's
Marks
all
and
about
Spencer does.
incentives. I mean, you're the economist.
I was just wondering if there are any other countries maybe going in that same direction. I in some ways think it's not a bad idea, actually.
There are local communities in Japan. I want to say Kawasaki, but a couple of places have voted.
Yeah. I was living in Oxford when they implemented this at Marks and Spencer's, which was the largest chain, and I was always having plastic bags, and then they stopped doing it, and I was confused and disoriented. And they said you have the option of buying this one bag for the rest of your life. The problem with that is I would always lose the bag, so that would go to
You're
Marks
a
and
woman.
Spencer's,
Have one bag,
you know.
2 bags.
Yeah. See, you're female, and you have common sense. Men don't have this.
I think it's not just the bags, but also the wrappings. Also, it can somehow do that, like the state in India. I think it's not a bad idea.
But then everyone would get arrested. So.
The thing about the bags, Aeon actually was like 2 yen off if you didn't take a bag. They would actually take money off of your total. So they were trying to implement some kind of saving.
I know in Australia they passed a law recently. Basically, all the supermarkets are no longer allowed to provide plastic bags for free. You have to pay for them. But then they've gone ahead and let department stores give plastic bags. It's kind of a strange situation. But I mean, it seems to be happening all over the world, doesn't it? That people have the countries are moving towards. Yeah.
But I think it's very much like a symbol. I mean, the amount of plastic used for plastic bags is nothing compared to what's used for all other kinds of wrapping. But I think it is a statement people can make by not taking a plastic bag. And the funny thing is that there are new concepts coming up, like how could you reuse bags, for example. I know in the Netherlands, but I think in other countries as well, there's a concept developed by bringing your old bags back to the shop, and then there's like a big hall, and people can, if they want, they can take a used bag. So things like that people think of and make it as a statement, and a shop uses to say like, well, look at me, I'm very eco-friendly, and it's part of the marketing campaign then. So I think it's more about marketing it in the right way.
A lot of if we talk about these bags, I agree, but we're really talking about the margins, a very small thing, and kind of making a statement, which is a good thing because that statement will have ripple effect. But I'm wondering, do you see business models like this, where they are either reducing marginally their profit, or somehow they are making more profit by having a whichever category, ethical, ecological, free trade, fair trade?
Well, yeah, that's actually one of the problems, because a lot of these entrepreneurs, they just do it, because they want to do it. They have, this empathy for people in foreign countries or developing countries, and there's this vision, and they don't care too much about the profits. That's one. For the bigger companies, it's part of a new effort to change their image. They just have one or two products in their portfolio, so they don't really care if it's too profitable or not. It's very small in terms of the sales volume. So I don't see a lot of these kind of innovations that you speak about.
No,
I think that this
no
is what they
Uniqlo
have
of this type of product.
Right, because it somehow seems to contradict the whole idea. This starts out as most of these organizations that bring these products to Japan actually MPOs. They're not even supposed to make products. So it kind of contradicts the whole image of, traditionally where this fair trade movement comes from. However, what I see is that more and more, even of these non-profit companies are saying we need to go away from just being perceived as a charity. Do it because you want to help others. Saying people need to buy these products because they really want these products. They like the quality, or they like the taste and so on. And there's a shift now towards that. Before it was just really, this is charity, please give us some money and do something good. People buy it even if they don't like it, just to do something good or to help people. But now they're moving away and trying to provide quality products of good design and good taste that people really like. So people buy it because they like the product, and at the same time they can do something good. So that's the kind of new fair trade where we're heading. And I do see the shift, but it's not fully taken.
Yeah, but
We're heading towards.
Muji or Starbucks are not exactly.
Yeah, this is just marketing.
In fair trade, there is no rule saying you can't make profit.
No, but traditionally this is where this came from. But I think for Muji and especially Starbucks and firms, they just have one product in their portfolio. That's just marketing. They're saying, okay, we also do that, but it's not, the main thing.
I see in Western countries, whether it's Europe or the US, some big companies coming up that are either taken over at one stage, like Ben & Jerry's with their ice creams. Their whole concept is about fair trade. And then at one stage they're so successful, so big that Unilever bought them. But also for Unilever, it's a statement of sustainability. But so I do see some movements that people really make a business case out of it and really, like the essence of their company, really promote it and make money out of it.
Whole Foods.
They're moving towards that, of course, and they have to, because just these MPOs, these social entrepreneurs, who do it just for the sake of doing it, that's not sustainable in the end, even though they want to be sustainable. So, they have to move towards that direction. And it will have to become mainstream. And also by definition, think about it. You're now using terms like ethical products or fair trade products, as if this were something, extraordinary. But actually, that should be the regular case. By definition, if these products are fair or ethical, then everything else is unethical and unfair. So actually, it should be the other way around. What we call now fair trade and what we call now ethical should be just the regular products. And only if it's not, then we should say unethical or unfair. It's kind of weird that it's, that it's this way. It should be the other way around, shouldn't it? In the first place. So this is where we'll have to move to in the area. And part of it probably will have to be done through regulations, some government efforts also to be more strict about environmental protection and these other things. The other thing is also, of course, the consumer sentiment, that people are more aware of that really demand these kind of products, so that really the market is also green. In terms of fair trade products, chocolate is one thing, coffee is another big part of it, but these are not necessarily the most popular products in the whole of Japan. And they're not traditionally things that are so much consumed in Japan anyway. Plus, if they're like the foreign-style chocolate that's too sweet, it's not really suited to the Japanese palate. So you probably need to adapt these products more to the local tastes, and so like I've shown with the miso and the soy sauce.
Well, thank you very much. You've given us all something to think about. I'll shop more carefully. I won't ask for plastic bags. And those. I can tell this one story. I stopped for a year using plastic bags. I refused all plastic bags, even at the convenience store, even though every time I went in, they gave me a plastic bag. And then I realized I was then buying plastic bags to put my trash in. So I was kind of defeating the purpose. And I think that part of the point of the many different vantage points that you talked about tonight is that it's a very complex issue. And moving forward in terms of producers, in terms of different segments of consumers, we'll have to figure it out going forward. But thank you very much for your time.